Well, good evening. Welcome everybody, and thank you for making the journey to come to the Heart Research Institute, to our heart-to-heart seminars, which is a wonderful event where we try and tell you a little bit about the research we do and its importance to you, and it also helped us to direct our research. It's an amazing thing. Now, just for the people don't know, the Heart Research Institute is an independent medical research institute. That means that we have our own board of directors and are more or less able to have the flexibility and the intelligence to be able to aim our research in many directions. That's fantastic, because it's not often that you see the chairman of the board engage with the actual research so much, and Peter McGorn is here in the audience today, so it's really fantastic to see the relationship between the board of governors and what the researchers are doing. So Peter, thank you very much for coming. That's fantastic. Although we're independent, we're affiliated with Sydney University and University of Technology Sydney, University of Western Sydney. So we work in conjunction with these great institutes. And that allows us to sort of also piggyback our research on what they do and some of their equipment. But I think we are reliant on our own direction, and we're reliant on our own fundraising to actually do the fantastic research that you'll hear about in a minute. So I'm actually here under false pretenses a little bit, because Andrew Coates is the director of the institute and he's away in Washington, so I'm actually taking his place. I'm actually a physician and a scientist by training, and I've been incredibly lucky to have been working in the Heart Research Institute in the past couple of years, because we are actually studying an organ that is totally underappreciated. We sort of take our hearts for granted. You know, we are born and the heart is there. We don't actually realize, I mean, what actually a heart does without actually us having to do anything with it. I mean, you probably know that we've got about 5 liters of blood in our body, and the heart pumps it around 3 times our body every minute, so it just sort of keeps on going around. And in any one day, the heart pumps that blood 20,000 kilometers, and that's more than from here to New York. So you can imagine the amount of work it does. You know, it's something like 42 million beats per year. It actually does its work fantastically. And it's a tiny thing. Now, your heart is only about the size of your fist and my fist. It's really related to it. But it's incredibly powerful. It actually exerts a pressure every beat that is about 2 or 3 times as strong as you can exert a full belt running. So it's much more powerful in your muscle. So I actually bought a tennis ball, because if you squeeze the tennis ball as hard as you can, you'll see what the heart does every beat. And actually, so this is the amount of pressure. This is the amount of pressure that the heart has. I don't think that. And this it does basically without us even doing anything. And it just keeps on going. Obviously, this is everything goes well, and of course we have issues that sometimes they don't go well, and this is why we're here, to prevent those things happening and also to treat it when it does happen. So that's by way of introduction. So it's a great organ to work on. There's a lot to do. There's lots of things that we can tell you about. I should note that we're pleased to be on the land of the Gadigal people, and we would acknowledge any elders past and present here, and we really, at the Heart Research Institute, we really are committed to help the Indigenous population achieve a health status better, as good or better than everybody else has, which is one of our major aims as well. So without any further ado, I will hand you over to our incredibly talented Katrina Dowling, who will introduce the panel and ask questions, but I think I'm challenging you, once you stopped asking questions, to think of questions to really challenge them as well. Any tricky questions you have, this is the time to have. So welcome, and I hope you'll come again. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew, for that wonderful and very entertaining introduction, and for bringing to life the functioning and pumping of the human heart with that analogy of the tennis ball. As you said, it's quite amazing to think that an organ the size of our fist pumps with such force, and without it we simply couldn't live. It's amazing. So good evening everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight for the fourth and final Heart to Heart seminar for 2024. We're so pleased that you've been able to make the time to join us tonight. So very warm welcome to all of you who are here with us at Newtown. We hope that you've enjoyed the pre-seminar conversation. And for those of you who joined us earlier on the lab tour, we really do hope that you found that informative. Thank you, Julie, for taking everyone through the lab. And we hope that it provided a terrific insight into what our researchers are doing here day in, day out. And a big thank you, of course, to those who have joined us online as well. We're always pleased to have your company too. So as I shared when we launched the Heart to Heart series in June of this year, our intention in inviting you to join us is to provide a regular opportunity for you all to connect in with our research team so that you can keep up to date with what we're doing at HRI, and so you have the opportunity to learn more about our cutting edge research and the progress we're making in tackling Australia's leading cause of death, cardiovascular disease. So by way of introduction, my name is Katrina Dowling and I lead the Development, Philanthropy and Communications team at HRI. I'm joined tonight by Professor Julie McMullen. Julie has recently joined HRI, moving from the Baker Institute up to Sydney to take up her role of Deputy Director and Director of Research. Julie also leads the Heart Muscle Group within HRI. So thank you, Julie, for leading the conversation tonight. And the focus for the conversation this evening is the work that Julie and her Heart Muscle team are delivering. Julie will also give us an insight into the newly emerging science of cardio-oncology and the work that HRI is doing to really lead on this important work, with the aim being to minimise the ravaging impact that cancer treatment often has on the human heart. And we are thrilled to have Warren Williams join us tonight too, along with Warren's family, his wife Tracy, and his daughter Larissa. I've had the pleasure of knowing Warren and the broader Williams family for a number of years now. And what a family of superstars you are, passionately advocating, raising awareness and raising philanthropic funding for cardiovascular research. Warren has kindly agreed to be with us to share his personal story of living with cardiovascular disease, having been diagnosed with atrial fibrillation a number of years ago now, and having very luckily survived a very serious cardiac arrest. So we are very lucky to have you here with us tonight, Warren and family. So thank you. For those of you who are joining for the first time this evening, I'd like to just provide a little overview of HRI, who we are, and why we're so passionate about the work that we do. So as Matthew said, HRI is an independent medical research institute, internationally recognised, and we have a single focus on researching the causes and complications of cardiovascular disease so that we can develop better diagnostics, treatments and cures. We were established 35 years ago, we're 35 years young, in 1989, and that was to really fuel both basic discovery research and translational research. And today, HRI is comprised of 14 scientific groups, more than 150 dedicated staff working across 2 sites here in Newtown and at the Charles Perkins Centre within the University of Sydney. And the team is focused on delivering cutting-edge research, and as an organisation, we have a commitment to nurturing the best and brightest minds, the rising stars of cardiovascular research, many of whom are scattered amongst the audience tonight. We're also committed to facilitating opportunities for women building careers in research and science. And this is particularly relevant for our conversation tonight, as Professor Julie McMullen is a senior female research lead within HRI, highly respected within MRI circles, and actively mentoring and developing female rising stars. She's an advocate for women, developing and mentoring her team. And why does all of this matter? Well, put simply, we want more people who are impacted by cardiovascular disease to have more time with the people that they love. That's why we're here. So, let's get underway tonight. Julie, thank you for making the time to be part of Heart to Heart this evening. To start, can you tell us a little bit about your background? What motivated you to pursue a career in medical research, and what is your driving force?
Sure. Thank you, Katrina, and thank you. Everybody can hear me, right? No. We've got the green light. Hello. There we go. That's better. Okay. Thank you, Katrina, and thank you so much, everybody, for coming. And so I think maybe if we move on to the next slide, that can briefly summarise, I guess, some of what I want to talk to you about today. And I might stand so that you can actually see what I'm pointing to. But you know, Matthew's already highlighted how extraordinary the heart is. And I've just got one image here, if we go to the previous slide. Yep, just here, where the human heart literally beats 100,000 times every time per day. So it really is quite remarkable. I guess, like many people, I've been impacted by cardiovascular disease through friends and family. And that's why I've been so interested in cardiac research. I think my earliest memory was with my grandmother. So my grandmother, she was a passionate gardener and a passionate cook, and my sisters and I used to spend a lot of time with her. She loved to entertain and have parties, and we would help her. But over the years, she got hypertension or high blood pressure, and that developed into heart failure. And I remember how she became breathless and she could no longer do those things that she really loved doing. And she'd often say, you know, I don't want to live forever, but I just want a better quality of life. The other thing which she really found irritating was having to take about 8 to 10 pills every single day. And so that really impacted me early on in my life, I guess. I was somebody who at school absolutely loved science. I was the kid who wanted the chemistry set. It was just amazing. And then I had the most amazing science teachers that really inspired me. I guess when I started my research career, I then had interactions with other people which have also inspired my research. And I just want to take you through some of those examples. So one that I've just put here is when an athlete came to see me because they were diagnosed with atrial fibrillation at just the age of 35. So he experienced palpitations, dizziness, as well as fatigue. And unfortunately, he had a number of catheter ablations, but the AF just kept returning. And it just highlights why so much more research in this area is required. He had a young family, and this really impacted his everyday life. Another example was when some parents contacted me because their son unexpectedly passed away in his sleep at just the age of 30. The parents were so distraught, as you would be. It turned out their son had an unknown case of hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, and I think it's really this unexpected loss which is so difficult to manage. And once again, we just need so much more research in this area so that we can detect these problems earlier and then do something to intervene. Something I'm also very passionate about is understanding differences between men and women. So we now know that women also have heart disease, whereas previously it was thought it mainly impacted males. There's now a lot of, I guess, different groups looking at this. This is just one example called Go Red for Women. And when I was in my late 30s, I undertook just a normal blood pressure test as part of a routine testing with our institute. I was fit and healthy, and I was quite shocked that I had high blood pressure as well. So I think it just highlights the importance of getting checked, your blood pressure checked, and really being aware of your health. And so you'll hear today that a lot of my research is related to exercise, and that's because it protects against heart disease. And so I guess if I just briefly summarise what our key goals of the heart muscle group are, it's really early detection, earlier intervention, new therapies for both males and females, and really just to prevent those unexpected events and improve quality of life.
Terrific, thanks Julie. So as I said in my introduction, you've recently made the move to Sydney to join HRI from the Baker Institute. Can you tell us why you've chosen to join HRI and what your vision is for the science within HRI moving forward?
Sure, and so maybe if I just briefly tell you about my journey on this world map here. So I guess I did grow up in Sydney. I did biomedical science at the University of New South Wales. I did then my PhD at the University of New South Wales. And then I was really fortunate to be given the opportunity to work as a research fellow and instructor in medicine at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Centre and Harvard Medical School, shown here. So I literally went all the way across the world to a city I've never been to in my life. But it was just an amazing opportunity, and I still collaborate with so many of the researchers that I met while I was in Boston. I then returned to Australia, but I returned to Melbourne at the Baker Heart and Diabetes Institute, and I was there for almost 20 years, and that was a great experience. But then I had the opportunity to come to the Heart Research Institute, and the reason I came was because I was so impressed by the discovery research that was being undertaken at HRI. Also the great links with some of the hospitals like RPA and the universities like the University of Sydney. And I think it's really when we all work together that we can really tackle the really big problems. And so that was one of the key reasons I came.
Terrific, great. And now you're leading the heart muscle group within
Correct.
HRI. Can you tell us a little about the group's focus? So how is your group further advancing what we know about heart muscle and the healthy and unhealthy functioning of the heart?
Sure. So first of all, let me introduce my heart muscle group. So they're sitting at the back of the room, and I'll ask them to stand, please, so that you can all see them.
Hey.
So first of all, yes, give us a big round of applause. I stand here, but I cannot do my research without them, so thank you. So we have Cindy, who is a senior research officer in my laboratory. We then have Clara, who's a research officer. We then have Sippy, who's a research assistant. And then we've got Ren Ping, who's also a research officer. And they were wonderful with the recent lab tour, so thank you. So we're now going to move to the next slide so I can tell you a little bit about our research. So we're called the Heart Muscle Group. And the reason we're interested in heart muscle is because we know that heart enlargement is a key factor associated with heart failure and complications. So in this image here, we've got a normal healthy heart. We've got the atria, which are the upper chambers of the heart, and the ventricles, the lower muscular chambers. Now, in response to high blood pressure, a heart attack, or genetic factors, you can see that this heart has enlarged. But this can then lead to heart failure, and it can also lead to atrial fibrillation. So in a normal heart, you've got electrical activity passing through in a very coordinated fashion. But with atrial fibrillation, that no longer occurs. And that's why people can have palpitations and changes in their heart rate. But I guess I was really intrigued by the idea that not all heart enlargement is bad. And so if we moved to the next part of the slide, I will show you that in response to exercise, you also have this heart enlargement, which is often referred to as the athlete's heart. But this is good heart enlargement or good heart growth. And when I started working in this particular area, it was unknown why you've got one bad heart that's large, one good heart is large. What are the genes responsible for that? And so I thought it would be really cool to try and work out what are the key genes responsible for this heart enlargement with the exercise-trained heart. And so if we move to the next slide, I'll just briefly take you through some of the key areas that we are looking at. First of all, just very basically, we need to understand these two different forms of heart enlargement so we know why one is good and one is bad. One of the key genes that we identified for this exercise-induced enlargement is called PI3K. Now what that stands for is not so important, but people often ask me, so it's phosphoinositide 3 kinase, and I won't say it again, PI3K. So basically, we're wanting to identify strategies where we can mimic the protective properties of exercise. And one approach that we've been looking at is through a gene therapy approach. We can also do this with small molecules or even dietary interventions. Now, another area we're interested in is also to identify new biomarkers. And we think we can also do this related to these differences between the disease and exercise-trained heart. So if a gene like PI3K, which is normally elevated in the exercise-trained heart, if that's decreased, we know that this can actually lead to pathology or it can lead to complications such as atrial fibrillation. And it's worth pointing out that a lot of our work is done on animal models, but it's really critical we know that this is relevant in humans. And so we've also shown in some human tissue that this particular PI3K gene is lower. And so that provides a good reason for why we would want to increase it.
Great. And is it a myth, Julie, or is there any truth in the notion that endurance athletes put themselves at risk of developing an enlarged heart and cardiac complications? Is too much exercise bad for the heart?
Yeah, this is a really complicated area of research, and it's an area where we need to learn so much more. There's definitely a very small population of athletes who will develop complications such as atrial fibrillation. But in large, exercise protects against cardiac disease as well as atrial fibrillation. So we really need to try and understand, why is there a small group of endurance athletes who will develop atrial fibrillation? What's different about their hearts, and can we find markers so that we can predict that?
So you're saying that there is a benefit to having, possibly a benefit to having a heart that becomes enlarged through exercise?
Absolutely. It allows us to pump more blood around the body in response to exercise.
Okay, terrific. Now, Warren, you're an endurance athlete, and you have been for a number of years. And an HRI ambassador. Tell us about your story and the challenges that you faced from a heart health perspective through your life.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me along tonight to tell my story. I've only got the two girls from my family here tonight, but if my son was here, he'd say, "Here we go again." And how long you have, but my heart journey's been quite lengthy now. I think I'm into my 15th year since I was first diagnosed with atrial fibrillation. You can put the camera away too, because I don't need you to video. I don't want to do all over Instagram. But yeah, so I was a person who was doing a lot of stuff at the time when I was first diagnosed. So I was a school teacher, full-time school teacher a day. I was either training and or coaching morning and afternoon either side of school. On the weekends, I was performing with my brothers in a vocal group, so we still do that now as well. So I was very busy. I basically worked 7 days a week. I thought I was Superman, and my son was running at the time as well. And I decided to take him. He'd been sick with the flu, and he was going to be racing in Brisbane in the National Cross Country Championships. So I thought it would be wise to get him checked out and have some blood tests before he went and raced. So I took him to the doctor, who was a GP friend of mine, who also ran with me. And he got the blood test done, and I said to the GP while I was there, "I've never had medical, so I'd really like to see what my results come up as." And to be honest, probably back then I was thinking, let's get my blood test so I can see how superhuman I was, because I wasn't expecting anything to be wrong with me. I was running really fast and racing really well for my age. I was 49 at the time, and he, being a friend of mine, he'd actually ran with me the day before. We'd done a 15k run the day before. And he just looked and laughed and said, "You don't need a medical." I said, no, I'd be really interested to see what my cholesterol is and my PSA. I've never had a blood test. I can't remember having anything done. So he said, "All right, let's do it." And before he got to that, I was sitting beside him like this, and he had his stethoscope around his neck, and he put it on to my chest, and he just went, "Oh my God." And the expression on his face was like something out of a comedy movie, and I thought he was mucking around. And I started to laugh, and he said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm fine. What are you talking about?" And he goes, "No, you're not fine. Go and lie down." So I lied down on his bench, and he wheeled out an ECG machine. He did an ECG on me, and he was just like in total shock. He walked over and turned all the lights out, and he's like, "I don't know if we get electrical interference here, but your heart's going nuts." And I was like, "No, it's not. There's nothing wrong with me." And he said, "No, there it seriously is." So we jumped straight on the phone to a cardiologist, and I was in the cardiologist practice that afternoon. And when he put his ECG on, he was just like, "Oh my God, how are you standing there?" And I went dressed to run on the treadmill because I was told I was going to do a stress test. And he said to me, "All right, we'll do the stress test, but you're probably not going to last very long. So if you feel anything strange, hit the button. We'll try and get you to 2 or 3 minutes, and then that'll be enough." So anyway, I jumped on the treadmill, and 25 minutes later, I'm just running along talking to him like nothing's going on, and he's just scratching his head saying, "We're jumping from normal sinus mode into AF, and you're going to flutter. Your heart's doing all crazy things. Tomorrow we're going to put you in the Mater Hospital and do a cardioversion on you." So whether hit with paddles, for anyone who doesn't know what cardioversion is. So I had that done the next morning in intensive care in the Mater Hospital. They shocked me back into a sinus rhythm, and that night I was allowed to go home, and they showed me how to check my pulse and sort of keep an eye on it. And basically as soon as I got home, I could feel that I was out of rhythm again. So I rang him up and said, "I'm out of rhythm." And he said, "No, you can't be out of rhythm." I've just got you back in. And I said, well, I can feel it, it's out. So he said, can you go to your GP tomorrow morning, get it checked again? I went back, I was in normal sinus rhythm. So obviously I was going in and out. They were going to try cardioversion again on the Monday, and when they checked, I was back in normal rhythm. So they decided to abort that, and to cut a long story short, I had 3 months of drug therapy, which was quite devastating for me because it took me from a highly active person who could basically do whatever he wanted to somebody who was walking around like a zombie, really finding it hard to function and walk, let alone attempt to run. So through my GP, I was able to change cardiologists or get a second opinion, and he took the new cardiologist took me straight off the drug therapy, put me on a Holter monitor for a week to see what was going on, and over that week I had these crazy stoppages where my heart was doing all sorts of things, but it would stop for between 10 and 15, 16 seconds of basically inactivity, and I had no idea that it was happening at all. So I'd been totally asymptomatic the whole time. So the solution was for them was to give me a pacemaker. So I got the pacemaker in 2010, and my life pretty quickly off the drugs and with the pacemaker went back to total normality. I was working again, I was singing again, I was training with the elite squad again, racing, and everything was quite fine. Leading up to my 60th birthday, I decided I was going to make a comeback to triathlon and try to make it to the World Championships with a pacemaker. I thought that'd be quite an achievement. And so I was training the house down with these young athletes that I was coaching in their teams, and felt really good. Felt probably fitter than I'd felt for a long time. And it was one Wednesday morning, it was April the 14th of 2021. I was out training with my group. If anyone knows the eastern suburbs, you know Coogee Beach. We were down at the car park at Coogee, and we're going to run all the way up the hill to Randwick. And I decided that I'd put the burners on and see how far I could blow them all away. So I took them up the hill, and I could hear them as I ran away saying, God, what's he doing? He's flying up that hill, you know, and all these comments like that. And I got halfway up, there was a big roundabout. I thought when I get to the roundabout, I'll just stop there and wait, and they can all catch me, and then I'll go again and do it to them again. So I put about 100 metres on them, and as I turned to look back to see where they were, everything just went black, and I just collapsed to the ground. There was no warning, no strange feeling in my chest, no pain. It was just, I was running really fast and feeling really strong, and then all of a sudden I was dead. So I just hit the ground. They were running up the hill behind me, so they saw it happen. I fell forward into a fence, a brick fence that was about chest height, smashed my face up, and then when I hit that, I went backwards and cracked the back of my head open. So by the time they got to me, I was covered in blood, both front and back. And I looked up, and there was just this circle of people just screaming and carrying on, and one guy on his mobile phone. And I just jumped to my feet, snatched the phone out of his hand and said, I'm not getting an ambulance, nothing happened, it's all right, I just fainted or something, let's go. So I took off and started running up the hill, and they chased me, trying to tackle me and stop me. And anyway, we got back to Centennial Park. They rang Tracy, and she got me home, but I was feeling 100%. I was totally coherent. I knew everything. They were throwing questions at me. Everything felt fine, and I just went around normal duties at home for the day. And late in the afternoon, everyone had been ringing to check on me, and they were saying, you should just ring your cardiologist and see what happened. So I rang him up, explained what had happened, and he said, I think you might have just had a drop in blood pressure and you fainted. How do you feel? I said, I feel fine. And he goes, all right, let's just be safe and check the device. So I was actually heading to coaching in Centennial Park in the car, and I said, well, I'm just about to drive past the hospital, so I'll stop and you can check. So they sent the technician down to have a look at my pacemaker, and he just looked at the screen and went, oh my God. And I heard him went around the back of the wall, and he said, he phoned Anthony, my cardiologist, and said, you need to come down straight away, and you need to bring Daniel with you. And I knew Daniel was the surgeon. And I thought, that doesn't sound too good. He walked back around, and I said, is everything okay? And he went, no, it's not, they'll tell you. And they walked down and looked at the screen and went, oh my God. So I ended up straight in the lab. I had an angiogram through my arm, and they found that I ruptured the main descending artery, and it had collapsed. Fortunately, it collapsed in on itself rather than blow out, so it caused a blockage rather than a bleed. So I was very lucky. So I spent a couple of days in intensive care until they could operate on me. And I had the operation done through stent therapy. They fixed the artery, so I got nice before and after images. and they told me I'd go home the next day. So I got prepared, had my shower, got ready to go home, and the electrocardiologist came in to me and said, "You're going nowhere." And I said, "Why? Everything's good. I've seen the scans." And he goes, "The problem is we don't know what happened to you. We don't know if you had I went into VT when I had the cardiac arrest. You said you shouldn't have lived. No one lived through it. And the only thing that probably would have saved you was a defib. Somehow you got up. We don't know why." So he said, "So now our problem is, did you have the VT event first, which caused the artery to rupture, or did the artery rupture and then cause the VT event? So we don't know what to do with you, so you can't go home." So I spent 13 days in intensive care with all different doctors coming to see me and looking at my data, and in the end they decided to give me a defib. So after several operations to try to remove the old pacemaker and insert the new defib, I was allowed to go home with the new device. Since then, my life's returned to pretty much normal. I went straight back to work. I was running and riding my bike within about 2 weeks, and I'm functioning pretty much as normal.
What an amazing story. It's really incredible that you're sitting with us here today, and I'm sure that, Larissa, Tracy, you've really been through the journey and ridden the ups and downs with Warren along the way too. So it's a very, very emotional, I'm sure, and tense journey that you've been on. So yeah, thanks for sharing that with us. Julie, Warren talks about his experience of living with AF and then having a cardiac arrest. Can you tell us, is exercise beneficial in helping people pull through those situations and in surviving a serious arrest?
Sure. So I think we might have another slide which I can take you through as well. Yes, here we go. So let me stand up again. So as I mentioned, generally exercise does protect us against atrial fibrillation, but some of our recent work suggests there is a sweet spot, so to speak. So here, if I just briefly take you through this graph, here we've got the risk of, for instance, atrial fibrillation. We've got somebody who undertakes moderate exercise, and in that setting, that's where we have an increase in this PI3K gene, and we're protected against atrial fibrillation. We also know that sedentary individuals who don't exercise actually have lower amounts of this particular gene, and they're at greater risk of atrial fibrillation. But we've got some recent data to suggest with extreme or intense exercise, just in some athletes, this PI3K gene actually decreases again. And that's why you can then become more susceptible to atrial fibrillation. So without a doubt, I think those people who are at greater risk really need to be speaking to their cardiologist to see what's safe. And I guess with our research, what we're trying to do is really identify new biomarkers in the blood so that people are better informed about what level of exercise might actually be safe, so that then you don't go into those adverse consequences such as VT or other events.
Yes, okay. Great, thank you. So yeah, always important to get checked.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Warren, can you tell us about how life has changed since the cardiac arrest? How have you had to adapt your life, and what changes, if any, have you made? And what's been the greatest challenge for you in terms of getting back into regular exercise and running?
I haven't really made a lot of changes. I got back to what I call normal pretty quickly. It was a shock after having the VT event and having, what I was told was a very serious cardiac arrest, and I shouldn't have survived. That was very scary, probably more scary for the family than it was for me. I went in this it was a strange state when I was in hospital, almost like I was in shock, and it was like I could view my body from outside, and I wasn't worried at all about it. Even when I had the 4 operations to fix me up, I wasn't at any time scared of those operations. It was mentally, I think I'd shut down on that. So when I got out of hospital, I was pretty determined to get back to normal very quickly. I was told by the cardiologist I might never exercise again. I knew that wasn't going to happen. My cardiologist himself was a former triathlete, and he said to me, "Well, you won't be allowed to ride a bike again because you can't ride a bike with a defib." And I said, "I've just bought a $12,000 Cervelo a week ago, so I'll be riding it again." He said, "Sell it while it's brand new and get yourself an e-bike." And I said, "That's not going to happen." So pretty quickly I decided I was going to be riding that bike, and it was about 2 weeks later. And I think probably only another week later, once all the wound had healed from the defib, I was out running again. So physically I was lucky because I hadn't really lost much fitness because I was only out for a couple of weeks for when it happened. And I was super fit at the time, but mentally definitely there was a challenge to get out there and try and do what I used to do. At first I pushed hard, then I learned to back off a little bit. The spot where I collapsed, I don't know, oh there it is, right there, 284 Clovelly Road. That was the wall that I smashed into. The group of people on the right is the group of people that were there with me, or some of them that were there with me on the morning that it happened. And that was kind of the first run back on that hill. So I run that hill once a week now. I'll be running it at about 6:47 tomorrow morning. And to be precise, because that's when I had the cardiac arrest, so I know it's about that time. But yeah, definitely when I run up that hill, every time I do it, it's a challenge now. I see it from 100 metres away and I think about it. A few times I've stopped and touched the wall on certain anniversaries and stuff like that. And the runners would be go, "You're all right, what's happening?" And it's like, "No, it's all right, I'm just touching the wall and feeling where I, you know." So yeah, mentally it was a challenge, but I got over that pretty quick and got back to normal. My life is super busy again. I'm working 7 days a week, coaching, singing on the weekends and stuff like that. So, and still doing quite a bit of training. I've just backed off on the level of training in the last probably year or so maybe.
Yeah, amazing. But I do hear that you're recently chasing Strava crowns. So you're still working on dropping yourself back, yeah? So Julie, can you tell us please about sex differences in terms of the heart? What do we know about the differences in terms of the heart function and enlargement between males and females?
And what I would say is we really don't know enough, and it's why it's so important that research is important in this area. So when we think about preclinical studies as well as clinical trials, in large, historically, people have looked at males. And we now know that males and females are obviously different. That's not really a big surprise, but they respond differently to treatments as well. So it's just so important that we do understand, I guess, relevant to our own work, that gene that I keep talking about, which is PI3K, is actually higher in the female heart than the male heart. So it's possible then therapies targeting this particular gene are also going to have different effects. So we need to just learn so much more.
Yes, and you've mentioned new biomarkers. So can you talk us through how they may assist in identifying and preventing AF?
Sure. So probably many of you are very familiar with cholesterol levels in your blood, like LDL or HDL. And they're called lipid species, and they're just two particular lipid species. But there's literally hundreds of different lipid species within our blood. Some of those lipid species are actually related to PI3K. And so we're very keen to try and identify these particular lipids, and we have some preliminary data to suggest that they can tell you if somebody's more at risk of heart disease as well as atrial fibrillation.
Okay, great. And as we mentioned earlier, you're a huge advocate for women in research and science. Tell us why you're so passionate about championing women and what you're doing to make a difference in helping women rise and pursue a career in medical research and science.
Sure. So now we have our next slide. So you can see, first of all, we've got on the left, so that's a picture of me at my PhD graduation with my PhD supervisors, Professor Eugenie Lumbers and Dr. Karen Gibson. And they were the most supportive supervisors you could ever imagine, leaders in their field, amazing females who just inspired me so much and gave me so many opportunities. I guess I really did my studies in an environment where they made me think anything was possible for females, and it was just fabulous. The other thing which really inspired me was, so both Eugenie and Karen, they were both clinicians, and this quote really means a lot to me, and I think really highlights why basic research is so important. So she's often asked, why did you get into research? And she says that medicine cannot advance unless there is strategic basic research. It underpins all major advances in human health. As a medical graduate, I was frustrated at the lack of knowledge in treating disease. Over the years, I've seen many great advances in healthcare, but many problems still exist. And I think it just highlights why discovery research is so important. Now, below that quote is a picture of me with my first PhD student, Lynette, which was really a bit of a full circle event for me. And so I just think it's so important that we give females every opportunity to succeed and lead, because diversity is just so important.
Amazing, thank you. And how can people get involved in your work? And have you got any final leave behind messages that you might like to share with the audience today?
Sure. So, you know, I think it's so great that you're all here, and I think if you can talk to others in your circles about our research, I think that's just so important. Within our own research, I guess we're doing a lot of work where we're really at the early stages of that research. And so it's so important that we can try and get some, I guess, early funding or seed funding, so that we can then get to the next level, apply for grant applications, and then do so much more. But I'll also briefly tell you, I guess, about our Centre for Cardio-Oncology, which is a really new area that we're interested in. So as many of you may be aware, cardio-oncology has really emerged as one of the most challenging areas in medicine now. So advances in cancer therapies have been amazing. The number of cancer drugs on the market is just incredible. But unfortunately, we're now finding that a lot of the cancer patients, they survive their cancer, but then they're getting cardiovascular complications. And I've just highlighted some here, such as heart failure, coronary artery disease, arrhythmias, such as atrial fibrillation and hypertension. And it just so happens that some of the same mechanisms that are important for protecting the heart, if you inhibit them with cancer drugs, you can also get cardiotoxicity. So for instance, the gene I keep talking about, PI3K, it's elevated in the protected heart, but a lot of cancer therapies actually block that same gene. So it's not surprising we're then getting cardiovascular disease based on that. And so we really need a better understanding of why cancer therapies are causing cardiotoxicity, in what patient groups, and how we can prevent that.
Yeah, that's, you know, as we said earlier, a new and emerging frontier in science, and incredibly exciting and much needed. Yeah. Okay, good. So Warren, can you tell us, are there any final leave behind messages that you might like to share with everyone, based on, you know, your personal and very lived experience with cardiovascular disease?
That photo on the left there is Baywatch, isn't it? But the significance of that one is, you can see my first pacemaker in my chest there as I'm running along the beach. It's pretty big. So that was on this side. I don't have the box there anymore, but I've got all the wiring there because they can't get it out, so that's left behind. And now I have a defib on this side, so I'm full of titanium and lots of Medtronic product, if you know of Medtronic. So there's a few things to take out of it. One, I think you've got to have a positive mindset. People ask me why I still exercise and train to the extent that I do, and that's something that I need mentally. It helps me with all the stresses of everyday life, and it just relaxes me, and you know, it lets me function as well as I do. I think if I didn't have that exercise, I don't know what I'd be able to do. So that's something I don't ever intend to give up, unless, you know, my body gives in and I can't do that anymore. So positive mindset is really important. But what I take out of it is, no matter how fit you think you are or what you look like, you don't know what's happening inside. And I discovered that day when I went to my GP and had that little test. I thought I was Superman. I thought I was going to get the best data ever in a blood test, and he was going to do whatever, and he'd be able to tell me I'm Superman, you know, go away and do whatever you want. And it was quite the opposite, and quite confronting at the time. The doctors told me over the years that because I've never drunk or smoked, and I've never even had a cup of coffee in my life, so I don't tick any of the boxes that are sort of influences on atrial fibrillation or these crazy arrhythmias. They have sort of said that it's probably exercise induced. I started doing endurance training when I was about 17, 18, and I had the first episode at 49. I'm 63 now, I'm still doing it. So I just found out a couple of weeks or 3 weeks ago that my two younger brothers have now got AF as well. So it's quite interesting. They're both very fit. One's an ultra runner. He runs, you know, 100k races in the Blue Mountains, and he's done all these crazy things. And the other one is basically like a ninja warrior. His whole backyard is set up with hanging stuff, and he's just all day long training and climbing walls. So they're super fit, but both of them have got atrial fibrillation. The middle brother had an angiogram the other week, and when he went in to have it done, he took his shirt off. They were like, "Oh my God, how does somebody like you have a heart condition?" So I think there's a point where you get to a certain age, maybe in your 40s, where you should, regardless of how well you are. It's pretty simple to have a heart check these days. Most GPs do it. There's lots of mobile services doing it. So there's no harm in going and getting checked. So that's another thing to take from it. But I've got a lot of good things out of what happened to me too. So, and that's helped me have that positive mindset. Medtronic, the device company, discovered me. They took me to America 4 times to race over there in the American 10-mile championships, which was an experience that I would never have had if I didn't have a heart condition. So I always look at those sorts of positives. I've spoken in Singapore for them at the factory and things like that. They're great opportunities. I've met you through, first of all, through the Heart Foundation, and then again, with Victor Chang Foundation, and here I am again with HRI talking to you again. So, fantastic things have happened because of what happened to me. So I think you've got to have, that positive mindset that you can turn things around and get really good things from a really bad thing. And that's what I tell people all the time. So I have patients ring me quite regularly now through my doctors or through Victor Chang Foundation, etc., who've just got a device, or they've just found that they've got these arrhythmias and they're freaking out, and they say, bring this guy, have a chat with him. And that's the sort of message I like to pass on, that turn it around, get the best out of it, find the opportunities you have that this is going to give you.
That's incredible, and your resilience and your positive mindset is really, really astounding. So well done to you. And I think those messages are really important. If you, no matter how fit you are, how strong you feel, having a check is really critical. And I think the other thing is, obviously that genetic element as well. And if there is a condition in the family, the importance of everybody in the family having a check.
So my younger brother found out that he was in atrial fibrillation because he bought himself an Apple Watch, and he downloaded, because I had AF, he decided to download the app, and then he started ringing me up saying, my watch says I'm in AF, and I went, don't worry about it, Apple Watch. The girls bought me an Apple Watch after I had the cardiac arrest and lived, and I put it on and it just kept saying go to emergency. So I don't know what it says. I don't worry about it. So when my brother rang me up, I said, don't worry about it, that don't work. And then he kept sending me these graphs off his Apple Watch saying, look at this, and that's how it started.
Yes, so clearly Apple won't be chasing you as an ambassador. All right, so thank you, Warren. Are there any questions from the audience? Does anyone have a burning question that they might like to ask, either of Julie or Warren? Mark?
Yeah, Julie, you were saying that you thought there were some dietary interventions that would help increase the level of the PR3K.
Correct,
genes.
yes.
Are you at liberty to say what they were?
So this is a dietary intervention that regulates a particular lipid species called plasmalogens. And it's quite similar, it's a little bit similar but not exactly the same as fish oil. But it's a particular, lipid species which can regulate these PI3K regulated lipids that I've been talking about. So we're still in the early stages of that work, but is currently looking quite promising. So.
Thank you very
much. Great talks, both Julie and Warren. Warren, inspirational, amazing. My question is kind of to both of you, and I'll direct it to you first, Warren, to sort of set the scene. So you spoke about you're an endurance athlete, your siblings are endurance athletes, and you've had these heart issues. Do you know of any sort of short distance sprinters, mid distance, that also have had heart issues? And then the sort of sciencey side of that to Julie is, is this an endurance thing, is this an aerobic thing, or if we do anaerobic training and we push to those higher heart rates for shorter periods of time, are we a little bit more protected, less protected?
So you can correct me if I'm wrong, but from my experience and the information I've been given over the years, endurance athletes are more susceptible to getting these conditions. And if you look at team sports, you've got soccer, AFL, those ones where guys are running all the whole game for, sometimes they're running half a marathon in those games. That's why you see guys on a soccer field just drop dead. That's what I've been told. With the power athletes, the sprinters, the rugby players, those explosive, off the mark, like you said, it doesn't seem to be as prevalent in those sports from what the research I've read and what my doctors have said. So,
I guess also just from the AF perspective, I showed you in the initial slides how the heart enlarges with exercise, and that includes the atria. And so for some reason we think that in some athletes that atria enlarges, and rather than going through the normal regression or reversal process that most people would go through, there might be underlying genes or lipids, which means it stays enlarged and then the electrical activity doesn't pass through them in a regular way.
What's known about your PI3 kinase?
So we've done some recent studies to show these PI3K lipids are differentially regulated in athletes who get atrial fibrillation. So.
How long does the heart stay enlarged for?
Good question. So for instance, it reverses very quickly. So in some of our preclinical models, if we exercise train for 4 weeks, it will reverse in 1 week. And I think it's quite comparable in humans as well. So as soon as you stop, it will reverse quite quickly. But if you exercise again, it will also enlarge quicker. So
it can stay large.
But if you continuously exercise, it will remain large. Correct. Yes, that's right.
Hi, thank you so much, guys. And my question is probably again for both of you. So in terms of age, for like long distance running, would you recommend that young kids don't run long distances, or is there an age that you would think not before that age, or and what is maybe the distance that is not recommended for young kids?
To my knowledge, we really just don't have enough research at that point in time to answer that question. I guess one thing to say about age though is it just so happens PI3K also decreases with age. So that might also explain why as you get older with endurance exercise, you may also then get those sorts of difficulties. Because I said with normal exercise, PI3K increases and that's beneficial. But with age it decreases, and in some athletes it's lower, and that seems to be what makes you more susceptible.
from a coaching point of view, and I coach a lot of young kids, my son and I have got a big junior coaching group and about 50 plus national representatives, and most of middle distance, so 800 metres up to whatever, 5k cross country. We try to keep their volume pretty low, so even the older ones are only on about 60 kilometres a week, but the younger ones are on about 25, 30. But there are some coaching groups that are just busting kids with 120 k's a week and stuff like that at the moment. Well, as Julie said, no one really knows the research. There's not enough research yet to say what the long-term effect of this is, but for me it was 40 years of training or whatever, where I didn't really stop and I didn't really have breaks. But the measurements for my heart are pretty normal apparently, so I've stayed within the parameters. But I know from my adult athletes, as they get older, a lot of them are starting to get these heart issues. And now with people doing crazy stuff like Ironman triathlons and ultra running and guys running across the country and all that sort of stuff, there seems to be an issue of more and more of this happening as people get older as well.
Any further questions?
Thanks, I really enjoyed that. I guess, Julie, this is a question for you. In terms of the cardiotoxicity effects, are there sex differences with those? I mean, if women have less PI3K.
So based on our preclinical studies, I would say yes. I would say in patients or the clinic at the moment, we don't know the answer to that question, once again, because not enough females have been studied, and it's such a new area. So.
I think Peter's got a question.
Julie, for those of us who couldn't hold a candle to Warren over 100 metres, let alone over 10 kilometres, what are the lessons for us? Super athlete, a miracle recovery on more than one occasion, but what are you drawing for most of us who are nowhere near his level of endurance or fitness?
So what I would say is for most people, any level of exercise is beneficial and can be performed safely. And what I would say is I'm hopeful that with further research, we can then identify markers so that we can identify people at risk like Warren, so that then we can provide good advice about what is safe to do, and we can prevent, for instance, atrial fibrillation from occurring to begin with. Because often once these cardiac events have occurred, you then become more susceptible, so we really want to prevent them in the first place. But we know that, for instance, heart failure patients who can exercise, that's actually really beneficial for them. So I'm a big promoter of physical activity and exercise.
And just on that, my fitness is probably likely the reason why I survived that cardiac arrest. That's the only explanation the doctors had, that I was able to jump up and run 30 seconds later and feel nothing. But you know, my cardiologist, who's a very, very experienced cardiologist, when he saw the data on the screen, when they read he just shook his head and said, "Oh my God," I won't use the language he used, and he's a very conservative guy, so when he spoke like that, I realised I was in trouble. He said, "Nobody lives through this. What happened?" I said, "I told you I ran back to the park." He said, "No, you didn't." I said, "I did. I ran back to the park." And he said, "You couldn't have got up and ran to the park." So, you know, fitness had to help with that for sure. And you mentioned before, I've also been told that it's only a very small percentage of elite athletes that end up with these conditions, and most elite athletes can train like that all their life and never have an experience like that. So.
Just a personal question from me to you, Warren.
Yeah.
My bike tells me that it's not the fittest. It's not the fittest who succeed, but those who can tolerate the most pain.
So you're asking me, can I tolerate pain?
I'm asking you about that.
Yes, I have an extremely good pain threshold, that's for sure, and my son probably has an even more extreme pain threshold. So that does help. I think elite runners or riders or whatever can push themselves a lot harder than other people and endure the pain. When I've had my operations, I've taken no painkillers basically. I've come out of hospital and just ignore that. I had a broken neck in 2019, I think. I had major surgery on the back of my neck, and I came out of hospital and didn't take any medication and just suffered the pain. And Tracy was ringing the doctor saying he's in so much pain. They said, "Well, he's got to take the medication." I didn't take it. So I think it helps to have a good pain threshold. Yeah.
I'd like to ask Tracy about her pain threshold.
But we have to let him live his life.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, I think every day when I go out for a run, it's a challenge for both of us, you know. I usually tell her how long I'm going to go for and where I'm going to go to, just in case. I've got my little identification bracelet on as well, because I run out on the trails and stuff quite a bit on my own, where I might not see anybody for an hour or two. So I know she must go through that, and the kids as well, you know. It's a scary thing, but I've just trained myself to get over the fear of it. And it's a strange thing, but when I had that cardiac arrest that morning, it was instant. There was blackness. There was nothing else. People said to me, "What did you see? Did you see a light?" All that sort of stuff. And I saw nothing. And strangely, I've kind of come out of that without the fear of death anymore. And you know, I know death's inevitable for everybody, but now it's more the fear of how you're going to die rather than the fear of death itself. So I'd much rather go that way running up a hill instantly than suffering with cancer for 2 or 3 years, you know. So yeah.
Very interesting perspective. Yeah. I think we've got one final question up there.
Warren, this is a personal question. If you're in and out of, say, a rhythm of anything throughout the day from, say, 45 beats a minute to over 200 beats a minute, would you stop exercise altogether, or would you just gradually, increase it day by day?
Well, I'm in permanent AF now. Chronic I have been now for 12 years. I think. My rhythm is kind of a little bit all over the place. So it's described, I don't know if you've got, did you have the graph that I sent you? Maybe not. But, so I can go, so my pacemaker, or now it's the defib, it's a dual device, so it's got a pacemaker in it. The pacemaker component is controlling my heart rate when it goes below 40. So once I go below 40, it just clicks in on that 40 until I go higher than that. So they're not worried anymore about me going below that. The top end can go crazy. Only a couple of months back, I was chasing Strava crowns and I didn't realise I had this run, belted it out, got home, downloaded my watch, came up, oh, you got a Strava crown. I went, that's cool. I wasn't even pushing hard. I'll go back again in 2 days' time and take 30 seconds off that and see what that feels like. So I went back and did that. And the following week I went to have my device checked and he's gone, oh my God, you nearly tripped your defib. What were you doing? And I said, when was it? And he told me the times and I just went, oh, I know what I was doing. So I showed him on Strava. And I'd hit the 250 mark, that's where my defib is set to go at 250, but it was for a very, very minute time, you know. He said I've got like a buffer of probably about 3 seconds before it'll zap me and knock me on my back. So apparently I spiked twice on these runs, and that's just how it is. So it's like that all the time. I can be running along, look at my watch, and I'm sitting on 220, and then the next minute I'm sitting on 42, and it's just how it is. And I don't feel different at 42 than I do at 220. I can keep going the same pace, and I don't notice. And I can sit on 220 for an hour and not even know until I come back and download it.
Yeah, the lack of knowledge that's happening is actually quite a scary thing in itself. Yeah. Okay, look, thank you everyone. In view of time, we might wrap up. I'd like to give a big thank you to everyone tonight for joining us. We've really enjoyed launching and hosting Heart to Heart this year, and we really do hope that you've found the series interesting and informative. And we'll be continuing to deliver the series next year. So please do let us know if there are specific areas of interest that you would like us to cover, and we'll do our best to cover that information. So there are many ways that you can support HRI. If you've learned something or enjoyed listening to the conversation today, please share something of what you've learned with your family, your friends, or your colleagues. Help us to raise awareness of the vital importance of investment in cardiovascular research. Our social media handles will be up on the screen. So please follow us on your preferred platform, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram or X. We post lots of interesting content regularly, and we'd love for you to engage with us and to reshare that content. The more people we can share this information with, the better. And you may also like to talk with us about providing philanthropic support to drive the work of our research team. So please do connect with us if you'd like to talk to us about how you might provide that philanthropic support to fuel our research work ongoing. Stay tuned for the date of our next event. We'll have our next event in February of next year, and we would love for you to be a part of that. So once again, I'd like to thank Warren, Tracy and Larissa for joining us tonight. It's been a real pleasure, and we've really enjoyed, hearing your story. So thank you, and thank you to you, Julie, as well. So we wish you a very, very happy Christmas. We hope it's a lovely one, and I hope that 2025 brings you all great health and much, much happiness. So enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you.
Thank you.